Hi everyone, this is Tabita and today I will present about school reform, hybrid discourses and second language literacies. So in this video we're going to talk about the first is introduction, the second is methodology, and the third is Olive Grove Elementary School. And there are three kinds of data analysis. The first is institutional context, the second is classroom context, and the third is hybridity and academic literacies. And the last we're going to talk about the conclusion. And the first is the introduction. So, micro-level classroom routines and macro-level organizational policies have helped to construct social inequities based on race, class, gender, and linguistic differences. So, what are the evidences? So, there are two kinds of evidences. The first is ELL were assigned to low-track classes that have poor language learning environment. So, low-track here means that the class composes of low-income students who are usually minorities. And because of the poor language environment, they have inauthentic reading materials, little practice in composing extended text, and few opportunities in self-directed learning. And as a result, the text the students learn to produce could be described as ungrammatical, awkward, and academically deficient. The second, the process of SLA is the process of Americanization. So Americanization here means that the task was also shaped by the task of becoming racialized into a highly structured social order where one's position is determined by skin color. And as a result, one has very equal access to resources, opportunities, and education. So this is the example. So this is Sandra. She is a Brazilian immigrant, and she expressed anger because she was pressured to define herself as white, black, or Latino when these categories run counter to her understanding of herself as Brazilian. However, over the next 2 years, she aligned herself to a group of Latina girls which she described as the tough girl. And then, in response to the failure of U.S. schools to deliver equity through education, researchers call for change in how schools are structured and how they approach curriculum and instruction. Besides, corporate analysts also raise a concern that schools must restructure to remain competitive in a rapidly changing social, political, and economic world. And in summary, the discourses of school restructuring reflected a belief that economic growth, powerful learning, and an equity agenda were possible to achieve if organizational structures were redesigned to equalize power dynamics, support collaborative action, and capitalize on diversity. And here is the research question. So, how do students, teachers, and administrators negotiate the discourses of macro school reform policies, and how do the positions they take up through their uses of talk and print influence English language learners' academic literacy development? And then the next is the methodology. So qualitative inquiry and CDA were used in this 2-year study of the microtextual practices of English language learners and their teachers in the context of systemic school reform. So here this study is a longitudinal study. And then the data source. There are four kinds of data source. The first is field notes from observations of school life as experienced by focal students. And then the second is transcription from audio tape, semi-structured interviews with students, parents, teachers' aides, and administrators. And then videotaped classroom and playground activities. And the last is relevant documents. And there are three phases of data analysis. Phase 1 is conducting a broad content and analysis to profile and code the school's activities regarding specific institutional aspects of schooling. And the phase 2 is analyzing the experiences of focal students. And the phase 3 is analyzing the discourses of school restructuring at the institutional level and the discourses of school restructuring as experienced by individual focal students in specific classroom contexts. So here we are talking about Olive Grove Elementary School. So Olive Grove Elementary School is located in Northern California in a small town called Hoover. So the population here is approximately 12,000 people. and most of them were employed in fruit picking and packing industry and the other low-paying service jobs. So these jobs anchored to the local agribusinesses and motels, hotels, strip malls, and fast food restaurants. So here the employment rate is 17%, and the average workers earned about $8 for an hour. And in 1990s, Hoover experienced a rapid demographic shift as Hmong families began immigrating there from refugee camps in Thailand. And the local economy are reflected in the olive grove's demographic data. So in 1990, 1% of 550 students were Asian, and then in 1992, 30% students were Asian, and simultaneously, students who were eligible for a free or reduced cost lunch grew to 81%. And to respond to these changing demographics, the school principal applied for additional funds made available by Senate Bill 1274. And this is the data analysis. The first is institutional context to hybrid discourses of the new work order and school reform. So Senate Bill 1274 was initiated by the California Business Roundtable, and which consists of 90 chief executive officers of California's largest companies. Their belief is that a strong economy is contingent on a strong public education system. And by 1990, California Business Roundtable and other associates had drafted and won support for an ambitious school reform package. So they invite schools across the state to submit radical proposals for rethinking the way they do business for all students. And one of the implications of this call for proposals in 9 funded schools reveals that teachers and administrators at Olive Grove explicitly targeted issues related to language and class as matters they wanted to address in applying for SB 1274 funds. And there are 4 reforms. The first is grouping students in multi-age classroom, and then the second is integrating English language learners into multi-age classrooms taught by teachers with both elementary and ESL teaching credential. And the third reform is implementing a collaborative, project-based approach to teaching and learning. And the last, implementing programs designed to develop a school culture that respects differences and supports students' use of their home languages. And these reforms reflect a belief that teachers and students, like managers and workers, can accomplish more when they participate in activities marked by a flattening of hierarchical structures in which authority is decentered and expertise is distributed through collaborative action. And the second reflection is that teachers and learners, like managers and workers in the new work order, can accomplish more when authority and expertise are shared through interdisciplinary collaboration. And the next is classroom context. The hybrid roles and discourses in Mrs. Rathom classroom. So Ms. Rathom is certified in elementary education and ESL with 14 years of experience. And she applied to Oliver Grove because she wanted to teach in a multi-age and multilingual context where she would have greater access to using technology in designing an interdisciplinary curriculum. And this reform, SB 1274, provided her with an opportunity to experiment with beliefs about teaching and learning that she already held strongly. And the students that Mrs. Rathoms had is 28 students with an even distribution of Hmong and English only students and even distribution of boys and girls. And how does she teach? She arranged the 28 students in heterogeneous groups based on their age, gender, and language backgrounds. And she assigned projects need to be completed in collaboration with each other, with her, with the bilingual aid, and or with the visitors of the classroom. And in giving directions, she used a variety of discourse options ranging from more fixed teacher-oriented practices such as lecturing, testing, engaging students in typical classroom routines such as IRE, to more negotiated, informal, group-oriented kinds of interaction. So how to achieve the goals of the restructuring plan? So all teachers were mandated to implement a daily class meeting or community circle after lunch. So what is community circle? Community circle was highly scripted event in which students seated in a circle could choose between 5 gambits: thanking, praising, passing, raising a concern, or responding to a concern. So here's the example with IRE. So the initiation, an English-only boy raised a concern with two Hmong girls who sat at his table because they were speaking Hmong all the time and he did not know what they were talking about. He was angry because he was sure that they were talking about him. So Ms. Radhom asked the girls to respond, and the girls indicated that they were not talking about him and they needed to speak Hmong to help each other to get their work done. And the evaluation, the teacher reinforces the girls' right to speak in Hmong, but added that they should check in with the boy to offer and get his help, and in doing so, form a better working group. And how the students act? The students used the discourse of community circle to further their own social agendas. The students regularly appropriated the therapeutic discourse of community circle to make their peer group boundaries highly visible. So, for example, the students, including English language learners, used this transcript to thank those who sat with them at lunch or played with them at recess. And the third, hybridity and academic literacies, friend, teacher, and student. So here we are talking about Pahua, the third grade student. So she was very competent in speaking English, but as one of the less proficient readers and writers in the class. However, Pahua's membership in a peer group that included older, more proficient users of academic English and the fluid roles all students assumed within Mrs. Radham's class supported her in producing academic literacies in English. So one day, Pahua worked with Sandra in order to do essays about the school's reform effort for an upcoming event at the town hall. Pahua and Sandra hybridized the roles of friend, student, and teacher in ways that provide Pahua's access to and instruction in academic ways of using English. So here's the evidences. Sandra's role as a teacher. So Pahua positioned Sandra into the role of a teacher by using the space of the classroom, turns at talk and gestures. And second, Sandra adopted a teacher-like postures by placing the paper between herself and Pahua, guiding the pace and focus of Pahua's reading with her pencil, and providing corrections to Pahua's reading of her text. And the next is Pahua's role as a learner. Sandra's piece also provided Pahua with a model of how to construct paragraphs with an expected single focus, how to approach the genre of essay writing, and how to use this genre to critique school practices. And how is the Pahua's work? She appropriated the regularly occurring syntactic pattern of a noun phrase followed by a dependent adverbial clause found in Sandra's essay, and she had learned the concept of essay and the concept of paragraphing, given that all of the sentences center on the assignment and each cluster of sentences is united under a heading. And the last is the Sandra's role as a friend. Sandra's asking a scaffolding question like, what about your mind map? So you can read the excerpt in the article given. And then this is the critic of the school restructuring discourses. So hybrid text produced in Miss Radham classes simultaneously created possibilities for academic literacy learning as well as new forms of marginalization. So the suggestion, the adultification of students, particularly girls and older bilingual students, into teaching roles revealed a new kind of inequity that manifested in a kind of literacy ceiling for Afri-capable students in this class. And the second critic is that school reform initiative that push teachers into many often conflicting roles and out of their primary role of designing and reflecting on curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and the allocation of nearly $500,000 during the funding period did little to relieve this tension, and the suggestion teachers and administrators involved in school reform need opportunities and support for closely analyzing the meaning of reforms in their local communities and for making locally appropriate modification to reforms based on informed microanalysis and classroom interaction. So the last is the conclusion. So the appropriation and fusion of micro and macro discourses associated with California School Restructuring Initiative as enacted in Ms. Ratham's class created a hybrid discursive space that allowed Hmong and English-only students room to negotiate linguistic and cultural differences in ways that fostered and legitimated the display of multicultural identities and supported the acquisition of academic literacy practices, particularly for less proficient English language learners. As such, the reforms enacted in Ms. Ratham's class disrupted many of the social reproduction forces associated with modern schooling. So, that's all from my presentation. Thank you for your attention. So questions and comments are welcome to you on Bella.